Well, this is an interesting story, diving with giants, I hope. And people often wonder, I think, as to what it is all about, diving with giants. Indeed, it is about diving the Northern Irish coastline, Causeway coast. What's that got to do with giants, I ask you? This is a story of diving the Antrim coastline from Rathlin Island in the east to Donegal in the west. So it's quite a stretch of coastline, really, and the photography around it. So it's really about trying to get the most out of the photography from the diving and giving people some ideas as to what you can see and take shots of. So as you can see from here, this is typical Northern Ireland. It's green stroke blue water, and it's very, very clear usually. Even after storms, you can get quite a bit of clear water. We were diving one of the wrecks around there after a force 7-8 had passed through, and it was probably some of the best visibility I'd ever dived on there. So it's that type of depth that allows you to get this beautiful, water around the coastlines of the Antrim coastline. So where are we exactly? Where are we? Well, we're in Northern Ireland or thereabouts. And no, you don't need to take your passport on the boat if you go and dive the wrecks in Donegal before anybody asks, because it'll be the common travel area, I reckon. But we are around a place called Ballycastle through to Portrush and Portstewart. So this sort of end, and then you've got Donegal, Mallinghead that way, Scotland that way. And at one point in time, Rathlin Island was part of Scotland. But generally, it's easier if you're going to go over there to get the ferry. We do the overnight ferry, and that's the ideal ferry to do because it leaves at 22:30. The new ferries now, by the way, they're very nice, and it gets in about 6 o'clock in the evening. Morning, and then it's a couple of hours, not even a couple of hours drive to Ballycastle from Belfast down the M22 and the A26, which is more like a motorway anyway, which is where our journey starts. So the Antrim coastline and the Antrim Plateau, the Giant's Causeway itself, is made up of a huge amount of hexagonal basaltic columns created during the Tertiary period, which is about 50-60 millennia ago, and that extends both east and west. And there is evidence of wrecked Spanish Armada ships from 1588. So a lot of them went round this coastline. Now, probably not a lot of people know this, but some more will. Just around here, this is called Spanish Point, and you're not allowed to go around there because there's actually a wreck, one of the Spanish galleon wrecks around there. But I believe people have dived the Causeway coastline, but I think that's probably now something in the past. So you generally, and we'll see it a bit later on, you generally dive a bit further round. But before we start the diving, a little bit of legend. This is where the giants come in. There be giants. So Finn McCool was this Irish giant, and he went off to fight another Scottish giant called Benandonna. I don't know whether his second name was Kebab, but I have one downstairs waiting for me. So you've got he tried to build this causeway. Funnily enough, somebody else has been thinking about that recently, but of course it never happened. They destroyed it, so they didn't end up fighting. But if you read the news in recent news, you'll notice that somebody put forward an Irish sea bridge. Which doesn't sound, sounds a bit fanciful, but I think it could quite easily be possible. But I think if you made it into a tunnel, it probably would have been better. But unfortunately, you've got this thing called the Beaufort's Dyke, which, if you don't know about it, was a munitions dump, and it's apparently leaking stuff, and it could go up at any time. So wouldn't want to be in a tunnel with that or a bridge with that. So maybe it will never come about. So, for me, the ferries are quite efficient anyway, but it's very nice to actually think that maybe somebody's considered that. What I didn't know is the Straits, or Sea of Moyle, is a name given to the narrowest part of the North Channel, which I didn't know until I did my research. So that's something that's nice to know. So a few topside attractions for those that don't fancy it, apart from, I won't mention the word Guinness. Oh, sorry, I did. But yeah, there are one or two other places that you can go. And of course, people's ears prick up as soon as you mention words Game of Thrones. And yes, I'm afraid a lot of the filming of Game of Thrones is in and around this area, specifically things like, well, you'll come on to this anyway, but dark hedges and stuff like that are around this area. You can actually visit it. It's only 20 minutes from Ballycastle. People like to do that and they do a tour of it. But people like also to go to Bushmills Distillery, which I must admit is very, very good. I think it goes round 5 distills, I think it is. I'm sure Alex will correct me because he's an authority on this. And you've got the Carrick-a-Reed rope bridge, but don't do that after the distillery because it's a bit vertiginous, as you can see from here. And like everywhere around here, it's a mixture of lava, ancient lava, and like Scotland, it's got lots of lava around it and lava plugs, so very similar topography and geology. Other quick topside attractions is Rathlin Island itself, and it's an excellent place to actually visit via the ferry. Very, very easy from Ballycastle. You can do quite a bit of walking, bird watching, but you can also get trips around the north coast, which you can see a little bit of here along this. This is typically north coast, but from the east side, and you get a lot of what is it, basking shark watches and seabird watches around there. There's a lot of castles around the vicinity as well, and also other deep wrecks. There's a massive wreck called the Santa Maria, which is at about 70 meters just off Fairhead, but nobody goes there because it's horrible, apparently, with the currents. I know a few people that have dived it, but nobody goes there now. It's way too dangerous, I think. And the one I like, which is very, very easy to do from Ballycastle, is Fairhead, which is the large rock promontory you saw in the first topside attraction presentation. And this particular one, you can walk up very easily. And this is overlooking Rathlin Island. And you can see Scotland because it's not very far away, Isla and Jura, and a bit of Kintyre. So it's very, very pretty sort of area that you can actually do lots of. Oh, did I mention Game of Thrones? Yes, I did, unfortunately. But Ballintoy is a little harbour which is used as Lord's Port in 2011. And it's next door to White Sands Beach. The beaches around here are absolutely amazing. And I'm sure that there are experts that will tell you what rocks are on beaches like the Ballycastle Strand with its Ferry rock. And so on. Yeah, because a lot of that and Pan's Rocks, all that sort of Mordory area at the other end of the beach, wouldn't want to walk along that at night. Okay, so let's go diving, shall we? It's about time we went off onto the diving scene. Now, I've kind of centered this around the main dive operator there, but there are Irish SAT clubs and Northern Irish SAT clubs around. And there's also other people that go through on liverboards. I think Richie Stevenson used to do it. One or two other liverboards and a couple of operators, but a lot of clubs do this area as well. People also from clubs from Belfast, Dublin, come up with their ribs and stuff. So it's an area, it's well worth taking, your club ribs out there because the area is amazing. So you'd spend a bit more than a day there with your rib. But the thing is, the boats that are the hard boats, there are really the only hard boats that you'll see around now, unfortunately, or fortunately for the people who, or the person that owns it, Richard. So I've been going over there for a long time, 22 years, I think. And I go back every year, sometimes twice. We're contemplating doing the Jubilee weekend, which is 4 days now, this 2022. But as you can see from this particular shot, it has a tail lift, and so does the other boat. originally Richard, I'm centering it on Richard, he had a small ribs, but now he's on these nice, beautiful big boats, very much like the ones that Jim Easingwood's got, that Marine Quest and Gary and Derek have got in Eyemouth. So they're similar sort of boats. You need the space. So the diving areas, really, you're looking at this particular area, and I'll just fill this bit in now. Like I say, I've sort of centered it around Richard's operation, so because he's the main operator, and you're more likely to go out boat diving with him than anybody else there, especially on the private charter. And he obviously has got all the safety equipment and everything going for it. So the dive sites in here I've mentioned are in red. So things like the Rathlin North Wall. There's more dive sites around the North Wall, and I've put arrows on there. Modiolus or Black Point, Modiolus Head or Black Point. We'll come on to a few of these. Drake, Lochgarry, Templemore. So you've got quite a few wrecks lying around the place that you can dive, recreational wrecks. And further afield, you've got the William Mannel, Castle Eden, and also the Argydalis, which is quite doable to the west. You've also got the Tovey on the Skerries. The Skerries is a beautiful aerial to do. And Carrick Reed Rope Bridge is done. And the Templemore, as I mentioned before. So quite a lot of mixture of wrecks and reefs. And the wrecks, well, we'll come to it, but you can dive it as a reef, most of the wrecks. So Commodore Rafferty, who's Richard Lafferty, who owns Aquaholics, has now got some beautiful boats, beautiful shiny boats. But if you look at the red bays, the red bay in the background, he used to have something similar to that earlier. And unfortunately, I didn't take a picture of it, but to the right is a red bay when I took this picture this year. And it's the biggest red bay, the biggest rib I've actually seen. I forgot what it's called now. Lady Jane, I think it is. It's huge. It's about these two boats were stacked up together and doubled in the length. It's monster. I've never seen anything like it. It must be the biggest rib in the world that you can actually get, but the Red Bay produce. But Richard's gone for AQ5, which is his double hull, which he generally uses for diving most of the time. These boats can, really get up to speed. And the other one is very new. It's not got as big dive deck as the other one, but it's still used for a lot of diving. And he does take both boats out at times in a fleet, so to speak. When we were out there in September, both boats went out to Castle Eden, which is a good idea, really, and they were full of divers. So it gets very popular at weekend with lots of local divers signing on. And as I've mentioned here, he's doing lots of commercial work, TV documentaries. You might have seen him on Coast and stuff like that. So if you look back, you'll find that. Around Ballycastle, I've mentioned a bit about the facilities down there with Guinness. Wouldn't be right without Guinness, would it? A couple of things to know, especially if you've got your camera as well. Like I mentioned, it's a mixture of wrecks and reefs, but you do have a lot of tidal conditions around there. But generally, if you time it right, you'll be diving in the slacks anyway, and in lees and stuff. It's better to use nitrox, that's for sure. In actual fact, most of the time he'll put you on nitrox anyway, because you won't get the bottom time. Otherwise, you'll be bouncing up and down. They'd be just straight down, straight up, because most of the dives are, like I've mentioned here, between 15 and 30 meters. And if you do it, you can quite often do 2 30-meter dives. Might be North Wall down to 35, and then it might be the Lochgarry down to 32. So you might be doing 2 30-meter dives and repetitive diving over 4 days or however long you're there. So it soon clocks up. So you're better off doing, low nitrox mixes. But it's quite a bit weather dependent and tidal dependent. As you can see from here, water temperatures are very similar to the North Sea type temperatures, but this is Atlantic, and it should be a little warmer, but it isn't. It can be quite cool, especially in May time. As you can see from here, the dive decks are spacious, and quite often you might stop at Rathlin Island anyway, for a brew, but well, it depends on what time of year you would like to go. But the facilities on Rathlin Island seem to be quite variable, so yeah, it depends on the season and the time of year. So you can get an appreciation of the particular sub areas around this. There's the Portrush Skerries area, the Donegal, which is also includes Culdaff Bay, which is where the main Culdaff wrecks are, Ballycastle and Rathlin Island. And I've tried to put some depths in here to give you an idea. I've dived this with camera all the time, and it doesn't matter whether you're on wide angle or macro, there's always something to see for sure. You do get used to spotting things, and I was out here a couple of years back with Colin and on the wreck of the Loch Garry, and I tell you, some of the stuff on there was amazing, and I think he was on macro, same as me, and you just did the wreck as a reef, and it's just amazing. We've got a lot of crayfish or crawfish coming back now, which helps, so you can get a lot of shots of crawfish. Yeah, one thing I want to mention here is you don't this area of diving, you can't take this lightly. A bit like the Clyde, you can't take it like you just can't take it for granted. You've got to be dive ready for the conditions. Don't go over there thinking if you haven't dived for 6 months, it's very, very easy. No, it's not. You know, you will probably get into currents at some point on one of the dives. You've got depth to contend with. You know, you've got your nitrox, you've got your camera to play with, and if you're going around Rathlin, you've got huge amounts of up and down, side and side currents, and that's within 5 square meters. So yeah, don't go if you haven't been diving for a while. You must be dive ready for this. Going to Cape and Ray for 3 dives isn't going to do it. So you need to get a bit more sea diving in and work up to it before you go, for sure. That's for sure. Even if you're used to sea diving, even me, you know, you need to get out and do a bit more sea diving, even if it's in the straits, stuff like that, and for sure. So don't take it for granted. So the Portrush area, we start with the Skerries, which is an outlying set of rocks, aka Skerries, and as you can see from here, there's this sort of end piece and a stretch. You can't really see it here, but there's a gap at the end here, and there's a black rock is one of the Skerries we do quite a lot. If you've been to the Giant's Causeway and paid the extortionate amount of money for the entrance fee and had a look at the organ pipes and the main hexagonal blocks, if you look at the organ pipes there, which are quite vertical, you get this underwater at the Skerries, especially along sort of this area here, but it's on the other side. So this inward side is quite sandy and quite dusty, so you generally dive the other side, which has got these vertical blocks, and it's very, very interesting. And I know people rave about this place, especially sea searchers and Bernard, Mr. Picton, especially for the nudibranchs, because they do nudibranch weekends and stuff like that. Nudibranch bashing all over up and down this coastline, and I understand why, and sponges and everything. Some of the stuff that you might find is quite rare on here in terms of nudibranchs and sponges, so it's well worth going over there just to do that even. And as you can see from here, it's been designated an area of scientific interest. So if you do go there, there's quite a few dive sites. Seal Bay is a swim through. Yes, you might see seals or not, but it is a bit of a tight squeeze and you can go through. But also, this is the bit that goes through Seal Bay. This was taken on the sea-facing side, ocean-facing side, or Atlantic. You can see it's quite choppy, but you're not diving there. You can hear instead, it's quite far away, is the drop. So it goes out. The only disadvantage around here is for the first 15 meters, it's going to be kelp. It's a bit like diving around the west coasts of Ireland or around that sort of area. because the visibility is very, very good. It's excellent, and you get that Kinloch Burvey as well as the Aran Islands off Ireland. It extends down quite far, so you do have to get beyond it. Some of the biggest kelp in Europe is off this coastline as well. So if you're a bit squeamish about the kelp, you do have to get below it. The quicker the better, really. So some of the dive sites might end up starting a bit deeper than you really want to, 21 meters. So this area can be a bit more greener, but the rewards are very good. You get your face stuck in some of the basaltic columns, and as you can see from here, it's really good. These are basaltic columns here on one of the sites along there. But you also get the lots of dogfish and horn rat, which is indicative of currents for sure. And Black Rock is one of these places that has huge amounts of current on it, and it's normally done on a drift. So as I explained to Caroline, really you end up as a gunslinger. So you're shooting from the hip with your camera. You just have to get it set up and go, and just whack it off when you want to, because you're not going to stop. It's not for a while anyway. Black Rock is a little breakaway rock, and you've got a gut in between that and the main part of the skerry. You've got to be below 17 to 20 meters, otherwise you're up over the gut into 5 meters and there's nothing there, just sand. So you've got to really get in deep. But the rewards, as you can see here, as I said, shooting from the hip on the drift, so to speak, you can see these are big walls, big boring sponges. But yeah, these vertical walls are agog with marine life. And as you can see, lots of anemones, sponges, dead man's fingers, soft corals, so on and so forth. But the levels are, although I've said ISO 400, you're down at about 20-25 meters, as I mentioned here. The light levels are very, very good. Put that on there because I wanted an 80th of a second, or maybe a quicker shutter speed would have been a bit better. But yeah, I mean, they'll cope with that. So you need to get it so it's point focusing as well, not necessarily multi-matrix focusing, really, because you need a single point. So if 6.3 will give you about 2 meters before it focuses, about 1.5 to 2 meters, which is about as far as your strobes will reach anyway, even in this blue water. So you've got to sort of weigh up how far am I going to be away from this reef to shoot it adequately with strobe light and so on, so you get your balanced light imagery. So yeah, here I'm about 1.5 meters to 2 meters away from the reef, because you don't really want to get too close. You don't want to crash it or anything. Same sort of thing here. These are on fisheye, so it helps to sort of visualize the impact on here of the dual anemones or the plumose anemones clusters. With all this sort of stuff is really where you're going to get currents as well. So as you can see, it does really leap out. So if you've got a nice big wide angle lens, this is where to play it. I won't go in with a macro because you ain't going to stop. Forget the macro. It's wide angle country. There's plenty of other sites that you can do macro on, much more easier than this. That's for sure. Okay, so let's progress on. One thing that you will find, especially around about sort of September time, is that the basking sharks that have been migrating northward steadily past Isle of Man and Falmouth have come up to this area, and it is known as a sweet spot while breaching the surface stuff that they do. Well worth having a look out there to find these. You do get minke whales as well out there, and the only time you're going to go out here is when it's flat calm conditions, because it's called Aff Bay. It is exposed, and you've got, even with west-southwesterlies, it can be exposed. Westerlies quite exposed, northwest exposed. Southerlies not too exposed, but it's still got a bit of exposure on it. So you're really going out there with flattish calm conditions, which is a good time to actually find the basking sharks. As I mentioned here, there was a guy that we were diving with him, Johan, you might know him, Mark Coombs. He was on one of the trips, and him and his buddy, we'd seen basking sharks break the surface, and blow me, he had sort of 2 basking sharks about 15 to 20 meters underwater as they were coming up from the William Manel wreck. So, you know, you just never know. It is a real hot spot. So just, you know, look out when you're diving the wrecks. In terms of getting over there, usually it's launched from Port Stewart. One of the big boats will go out there, and it takes about 50 minutes to get out there. If you're on a smaller boat, it will take about an hour and a half, maybe longer. So it's an advantage to get out there on one of the big boats, and it's much, much easier with a tail lift, especially if it starts to get a bit swelly. This particular area, which I've mentioned, Loch Foyle, was quite an important place for the wars during the World Wars, because it was like a safe anchorage, which was quite useful. So you cross the front of Loch Foyle before you get here. Right, so start with the Castle Eden, and as Alex mentioned, there is a new attraction there. I deliberately sunk my camera system there for you to add to the attraction that is already down there. Yes, sadly, and it was a fantastic dive. We had 25-meter visibility on it. It was clear blue water, no current, me and Ken, and we went down there, did the dive, and we came back up, got to the surface. I was 2 minutes on the surface, and my camera detached itself from the series clipping system I had on it, and decided to float down to the seabed. So there's £8,000 worth of camera system on the seabed at the moment, in amongst the William Manel, the Castle Eden's wreckage. I'm hoping, that was September, I'm hoping to actually get it back when the weather prevails, but at the moment I suspect worst case scenario is actually April. But they're going to go down there with a couple of DPVs, hopefully, and we'll try and retrieve it. But the Castle Eden itself is well worth visiting. It's quite a large 84-meter length of ship, but it's stretched. So when it went down, it broke into 3 pieces. So the area to cover bow to stern is not 84 meters, it's about 100 meters. But it's in 33 meters of water, with a lot of shells and horse mussel shells and stuff like that. You can see the seabed. So it's quite a hard seabed, as opposed to where the other wreck is, which is in a very sort of sandy, white sand seabed. But as you can see from this shot, it can be quite visually appealing, especially for wide angle photography. I know quite a few divers have gone down there deliberately as models and done photography with modeling. It's very useful to do that. The midships is the biggest section. This is part of the midship section, which includes boilers and bits of engine, but ribs. So it's from, let me just skip back. It was from World War I, 1917 torpedo. And as you can see from here, there is a lot of marine life on it. Yes, you can do macro on here, but you're better off doing, wide angle. Of course you can do macro, but it's a better one for wide angle, I think. The small stern section, you can very, very easily swim over to it in 2 minutes. It is definitely awesome. And this is not the best viz I've seen. This is about 15, 20 meter viz. The viz we had, it was brilliant. I'm not going to be running the 1 minute video that somebody took because it's a bit of fiddling. But next time I'm around, I might do, when we're actually at the meeting area. Lobsters, yes, there's a lot of lobsters around. Very, very many lobsters. You also get sand eels, you get huge shoals of fish. If you look at the boilers here, when we were down there in September, you couldn't see the boilers for fish. Absolutely everywhere. Absolutely, it's just packed out with mainly pollock, lots of little wrasse, like court wing, lots of some big wrasse, and you get some very, very big pollock, lots of lobsters, as you mentioned. Yeah, they're everywhere, and bib and poor cod. So this is the stern section. Again, this is very swimmable too. It's very, very easy to see. We could see it. I mean, it's very easy to see. This doesn't do it justice, I'm afraid. It's on its side, so it will be on its starboard side. So down here is the starboard side. It's only a small piece, and this is up on its port side. There is a gun mount that's lying around nearby, but if you go around this corner, this is what you see. So this bit here is this bit here. You can swim into it as well in here if you wanted to. So there's a lot more that you can actually see. This doesn't show you much, but if you come round, you can see it's very photogenic. In the right conditions, it definitely is. So moving on to the next one that is off at Donegal, William Manel, which is, it was a fishing vessel, and then it went to Her Majesty's trawler, and then it went back to a fishing vessel. And yeah, so it was doing a bit of HMT. Yeah, it was minesweeping, but it sank as a trawler in 1947 in Culdaff Bay. It's further in, so it's got all this sand. But I'm very, very tempted. If you want to do macro, this is a good one to do macro. I've done macro on the wreck and the reef next to it, because the reef, honestly, is, if you've done with the wreck and you've got time, or you just want to do the reef, it's a garden reef. It's brilliant, honestly, it really is. We'll see some pictures of that. So this is one that you could either do wide angle or macro on. The amount of nudibranchs I found on this in June or May is just stunning, for sure. It's got like a rakish submarine bow, which is interesting for a trawler. That's probably why they put it in as a minesweeper. But as you can see, there's lots and lots of marine life all over it. This attracts nudibranchs all over the place. Yeah, you got more lobster, I'm afraid, but if you're not into the lobster bit, this again can be stunning. It's on bright white sand. This is the owner of Aquaholics, Richard Lafferty. You can see, I'm just trying to think when this was taken, but you can see he's no gloves on, and a lot of people dive with no gloves on there because it can be quite warm. I think this is June time. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But some of it, the midships is buried a little bit in the hull, there's like a skeleton like. This is rounding the stern. It's got an upturned winch, which has usually got congers on it. This is part of the stern. There's a bit broken away off it. You can't see it here, but looking from the top, you can get the impression here. And this is part of a gun mount on there. So it's a little bit shallower than the other one. And what you do get is huge numbers of sand eels, both greater sand eels mid-water and also lesser sand eels. And there's a bit few sand eels here on this bottom right hand area here, which is showing a bit of the garden reef that's nearby. But lots of marine life, lots of fish around it again abound. It reminds me a little bit of the Freekabaan on the Shetlands, but much better viz most of the time. Although the Freekabaan in Shetlands does have very good viz as well. The garden reef nearby has got, this is your wreck, has got all this sort of turf on it, very, very fast drift turf. Lots of hydroids, you can see it. So hydroids equals nudibranchs. Lots of hornwrack equals nudibranchs. So if you're going to get nudibranchs, you're going to go on this, and very, very easy turf to go over, beautiful sand. So it's worthy of exploration and forgetting the wreck for a while. Right, so here endeth our dive sites 2, and here we start our dive sites 3. So I'll put a few silly little arrows on here, but this is a bit further close, not further afield, but a little bit closer to home. Launch point for this would be Ballycastle. Surprisingly enough, you might think, yeah, it's just a ridge of rock going out, but actually there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. People poo-poo it a little bit, but I think it's a really, really nice site. You can actually go off here, way off the point, and there's some really, really interesting rock formations, like rock bowls and huge amounts of cat sharks I've seen here, like 3, 4, maybe 10 mating. You know, I'm sure they're mating. Maybe it's a sweet spot area for mating cat sharks. I don't know, but especially around this point, you're almost guaranteed to find 2 or 3, maybe 4 cat sharks or dogfish, as people know them, which is good. So, like I say, there's two ways of doing this. In September, we went from here and went round. Done it a few times like that. We've got, I forgot the name of it. As a particular squishy bryozoan, I think it's called Alkyonum diaphanum or something, and that usually has large aggregations of a nudibranch called Onchidoris bilaminata on it, and that seems to favour this backside, which will be sort of northeast facing area here over the other side, which, fun enough, there we go, Alkyonidium diaphanum. That was pretty good. And this is the Onchidoris bilaminata. So if you're into the nudibranchs, this is a place to see. Can't guarantee it, of course, nothing's guaranteed. But you also get lots of hornwreck and bryozoans. But then you get the corner is very dusty, but that actually contains cat sharks. A lot of wrasse around there as well. So if you're into photographing wrasse, I would say this site is both wide angle and macro. You can see I've combined both there, or close up. But I do think that macro is very good here, and I've seen lots of squat lobsters and congas and stuff, but you do get some good results with the wide angle on here. Again, it's sort of the depths. This line of is about 15 meters. You wouldn't want to be going up there because you get whipped up by the current, but along here, coming around the corner. So if I just skip back, so we're along this corner now, just at the end here. You get this huge, very, very vertical wall covered in striped anemones and big elephant sponges. Yeah, sorry. And that wall goes into a little bay area which you can actually investigate, but it then goes into a kelpy bit. So it's best to stay deep on this one, up to about 18 meters, and then get out. But like I say, spend a lot of time on this wall with this, lots of photography on it. So moving on to our first wreck of this area, we've got the Temple Moor. For those that are hardened wreckies, I would look away, because you won't want to be doing this as a recce, because you can't. It's not a wreck, it's more wreckage laid out in the fashion of a wreck. If you're a photographer, that's a different matter. I would say this is, yes, not anymore, Mike. Sadly, somebody told somebody who told somebody who was a fisherman, and it used to be called the Conga Wreck, but unfortunately they were fished out, and you could see free swimming 3 meter long congas that would be either side of you swimming around. There must have been about 8, maybe 10 congas around on it for quite a number of years, but they fished them out. However, the good news is they tried to reintroduce them, and I think there's about 3 or 4 now. Small, but they're around and growing faster. So thankfully, Mike, maybe we can get a few more congas next time. I like this site. Well, I liked it for the congas, and unfortunately, when the congas were fished out, I was still on slide film Fuji Provia, which is a shame, really. This little coastal steamer, yeah, it ran aground, and it is used as a backup site, but I do like it anyway. Like I say, the wreckage is spread as a wreck-like wreckage, and it has quite a few redeeming features, like the engine and the boiler, which are the highest points, but they are quite tall, and you can pick out things like the valve over the engine area, and the boiler pipes and so on. So there is a lot going for this photogenically, and it's only in 18 meters. If unfortunately you get the peaty brown from the river, then you won't get this visibility. You'll get a nice peaty brown. But if you have an occasion which you know, turns lucky, then you will get this beautiful sort of blue water, and it's like I say, you're near the river that comes out of Ballycastle, so if it's not going to get much, then you're going to get this. As you can see from here, there's the propeller still intact, and there's usually a conger around this area, round about the stern post, which is near the propeller, little conger. So yeah, part of this, you might find a couple of congers in there, small ones. The wreck is all pretty much, apart from the boilers, is pretty much, you know, at one depth. So you're going to be square profile in this, but it's a nice little one to do. And I think you could get a lot of photography around this, better than I've done. Any shallow wrecks around here, if you do them in September, are going to be more kelp covered. So you have to pick your time. The kelps normally. Right, yes, you did miss it. All boat dives, Lynn. There is shore diving, but it's mainly club diving training areas. You can also, yeah, you can shore dive out of Portstewart, but there's not that much in the way of shore diving. Like I say, it's mainly training. And if you're going over there as a visitor, there's more than likely not going to be doing any shore diving. Yeah, I guess you could. And you can get tank fills. There's a local house reef next to the dive centre in Portstewart, but it's, yeah, your best results are not shore diving. You couldn't go offshore to the Skerries, and you certainly couldn't do the Templemore, even though it is literally just out of the Ballycastle Harbour. You wouldn't want to do it. It's because it's in a little bit of the fairway. You need a boat cover for it. So, and with currents being around, I would say, apart from the local shore dive in Portstewart, you're asking for trouble for sure. There is just trying to think, there is a shore dive at Cushingdull, which is on the east side of this particular peninsula. Yeah, so you can shore dive that, but it's quite shallow. It's used as a backup site. So a bit more of the Templemore. This is part of the hull, which is like splayed out, a bit like a V that's now not a V anymore. It's like a bent U shape. So yeah, above this and in it, you'll get ribs along it. But you get quite a lot around here. And if you want some different coloured Devonshire cup corals, you get rusty coloured Devonshire cup corals. You get sort of stuff around there. And of course, you can get diver action shots if you wanted. Unlike this picture, which isn't very much of a diver action shot, but yeah, it's nice just to cruise along it. It's very easy to navigate. But I think the best bit, and you've got to be very careful because the whole of that bow somehow has twisted and is upside down, and it's resting, I believe it'll be resting just on this sprit of whatever it is, spar, and it is quite unmistakable, this bow, but it's very, very photogenic if you get it in the right conditions. The left hand is probably the right conditions. That is Ken, by the way. This is not too much of the right conditions, but as you can see, you can get the drift. I wouldn't attempt really much to go underneath there. If it does fall, you are definitely trapped in it. You'll never get out of it. So it's not worth, yeah, getting in there. Put your buddy in there instead. Ha ha ha. No, don't do that either. But as you can see, it's very photogenic. All right. I'm afraid we're going to have to do some more dive sites. And if you're thinking of world-class dive sites, there's a lot around Scotland, and we know that. But this area is absolutely world-class. Let me just switch it back. This is a diagram, side scan sonar enhanced diagram from a booklet that was provided to me from Joe Breen of the NIEA. That's the Northern Ireland Environmental Agency. I know Joe quite well, and he's just retired actually. And he did a lot of stuff with Bernard Picton and is it Claire Lightfoot and a few others. They do a lot of sea search. So he's done quite a bit with them around here. He's done quite a lot for the Ulster University. And they did a lot, the sea searchers did a lot. All these numbers here are referring to sea search sites they did. And he provided a lot of lot of information for them, and they did this sonar and a lot of equipment for doing all these sonar sightings and stuff like that. And a lot of these are not dive sites. These are just jump in and let's see what's there dive sites. But it gives you an idea of what is around here. Some of these, like I say, are dive sites, the ones that I've highlighted mainly. Now, Rathlin Island itself lies about 5 miles north and is offshore. So if you imagine it as a broken biscuit, it's come off from the mainland, and all this area is mainly chalk. This is chalk. Yeah, it's mainly limestone, and then this is mainly lava around here, especially around here as well. And you've got a lava intrusion that comes through Black Point, hence the word Black Point. Modiola's Head it's been named Modiola's Head tentatively by the sea searchers there. So as you can see, diving around here is not for the faint-hearted. This is like diving around South Stack on steroids times 20. It is just Overfall City, and when you're crossing it from Ballycastle across here, you'll hit overfalls and stuff like that. Always, it's constant. The Wreck of the Santa Maria is here, which is getting near the overfalls. And there's another wreck here that I think has been visited a few times, but they don't generally, because it's overfalls. But the worst ones, I think, the worst currents you're going to find along this at Fargan Lack Point and Durganum Point. But that's the best marine life you're going to find. It's world-class diving, world-class marine life, and it's both wide angle and macro. I've done both on it, and the same here. The Loch Garry is probably the most popular site there, because you get a lot of prevailing winds from the west. Then you get this dived quite a lot more than you think you do. And most trips you're diving it 3 times if you're over 4 days. But it's well worth it. So you could do macro and wide angle on it. You do a wide angle day on it and a macro day on it. It's well worth it. So generally what might happen is you might do one of the north walls, and then he'll come around here, or he'll come around here, and then you go into here, and then you come round and out and do the Loch Garry and then back. Or he might do the Drake, which is well worth doing. If you're into archaeology, and Drake is a good one to do. So as I mentioned before about Mark Coombs and his basking sharks, well, that's Mark, and that's our Colin Samuel. And I think 1 or 2 of you know Adrian Brooks, so that's Adrian. Remember, because Colin and Adrian were double quotes buddying together. One of the features around here are the fan mussels, Trina fragilis, and they're burrowing an enemy called Arachnanthus sarsi. Extremely rare, but they have found them. So if you're into doing, you know, the sea search bit, or you just want to find these, you know, this is one of the places you might find them. Black Point or Stronley Point Bay is, as I mentioned before, a lava intrusion through a limestone cliff. This gives a bit, lots of boulders at the bottom of it, but the marine biologists and sea searchers don't like you diving it because of a lot of the stuff that's down there can be easily disturbed. But it's well worth it. Last time we dived it, we did it on a drift. Quite often you're going to find you do it on a drift, so you do have to be doubly careful. But there's a lot of interesting and more rarer sponges around here. Okay, that one isn't a rarer one. I think that's Haliclona oculata, which is mermaid's fingers. Although on second thoughts, it could be a Stelligrea stuposa. I'll have to have a look at that. But you do get lots of anglerfish, Ross coral or bryozoan. Lots of photographic opportunities, very many friendly cuckoo wrasse. But a lot of this could be done with macro, apart from if it's on the drift, then you could be struggling. It all depends on what you're doing, sorry. So it's well worth having a look at this. Further to the east, people do this as a backup site, but I think this is one of the most amazing wrecks you'll find outside of Scapa Flow, and it is a cousin, if you like, to HMS Hampshire and that sort of ilk of armoured cruisers. And this particular photograph was taken, I took a photograph out of McCaig's Bar. HMS Drake, which was torpedoed and then eventually went down in Church Bay, but unfortunately parts of it were still above. But they dispersed it back in the 1970s after that. A guy called Richard Bufton was involved in that, who used to run a dive centre off Abersock. Yeah, and he was part of the Navy at the time, and went over and dispersed it more. If you see it, you think, oh my God, it's just wreckage, and I can't understand it. Start diving it, and then you figure out what it is. Then you figure out where we are, and honestly, you then start figuring it out that actually it's still laid out as it went down. It's just blown up a bit, and you then start recognizing pieces of wreckage and guns and live shells, bits of turret, stuff like that. You start looking at the hull, and then they did several surveys over a few years on this one, and I can't publish it here because it's heavily copyrighted, but they did a whole layout of the whole thing, and including the Ella Hewitt, and it's fascinating. And no, I didn't actually update this from keg to skeg, I'm afraid, but there is the remains of a battering ram at the bow here, which you can still see, as well as an anchor. If you dive it in September, you'll get a lot of kelp, but you need to get under that kelp. People just cruise over it and go, oh, we just saw kelp. You need to get under it, get your backside under there, start photographing stuff, and having a look round. It's an archaeological gem, if you like. That would be the best way to explain it. Where else, apart from Scapa, are you going to find oak wood backing against 6-inch armour plate? Where are you going to find it? You know, so think about what you're actually looking at. It's a big piece of history, and you don't need to go to Scapa Flow for it, even though it's the same era. And it's shallower. It's in 15 meters of water, so you get loads of time on it. This hexagonal nut, I believe it was surveyed, and it's part of the connecting nut from the shaft, propeller shaft. And you've got pieces of rudder remains lying there. You can see the kelp here. This is the kelp on the top, not below it. So you don't get much kelp below it. And you can see from here, these were actually published in a book that was created by Wessex Archaeology and part of the University of Ulster. So I did these in cooperation with Wes Forsyth, which Mike, you might know. Wes, he does a lot of stuff around there. And I believe these to be part of the casemate guns, 6-inch casemate guns, the one from Scapa, you can see here. Just a bit of history. The augmented cruiser was an intermediate cruiser design, which was already obsolete when it was launched, actually, which contained two 9.2-inch guns and a series of 16 6-inch casemate guns. Casemate, if you're not sure, is basically a bit like a turreted cannon, but you can only move it in a horizontal way either side. Unfortunately, were they breech loading? Possibly. Well, I'd have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure it would have been breech loading guns, because you wouldn't have breech loading came in 1864, although it was around in 1850s, early 1850s, but it was too late for breech loading guns on ships until about 1864, when they started using it in the Gloire and the Black Snake, HMS Warrior. So after that, this would have been breech loading guns, more than likely. I don't think there was any front loading guns around after that, especially, yeah, because 1906 was when Dreadnought, or around about that time, came out. So everything of the Royal Navy became obsolete on that time. So things like 1902 yeah, that came immediately obsolete on that, and so did all the battleships, cruisers, everything. But they were in, you know, secondary battle squadrons, if you like, in World War One. Like a lot of the wrecks around that time, a lot of torpedo tubes were fitted around, and this was no exception. But the interesting thing that I found was it's now been designated as a scheduled historical monument. So that's how important it is. The Drake class, which was included, the Good Hope, were improved Cressy class. Now, I don't know whether you know about the Cressy class, but they were one of the first to be torpedoed at the outset of World War One off Scheveningen, which is where I used to work out off the Hague. I used to live there 10 years, and yeah, it was a shame, really, big loss of life. But the Good Hope was actually sunk at the Battle of Coronel, which is off Chile. Yeah, which in sadly it was more or less all hands off that. But so you're actually seeing something that has a lot of history around the squadrons and its sister ships. So I like I say, it's a piece of history, a snapshot in history that you won't find outside. You know, it's one thing you can find outside Scapa Flow. You won't find it in a lot of other places, especially at this depth. So you've got these, yeah, lots of plates, and there's an intersection, an interface, they call it an interface, between the trawler and the Drake. But you could still find things, you know, this is getting under the kelp line and things, so you can find lots of sort of shapes and stuff and identifiable pieces around this side, because it's yeah, it's on it's upturned, so you can imagine where it's going. This is part of the interface. So I don't know, and it's unclear whether these are boiler pipes from the Hewitt or probably from where they are, because it's towards the bow of the Drake. They're more likely to be the Hewitt. And whatever this is, it could be, yeah. I mean, the Hewitt went down 60 years ago. My goodness, you know. So you've got this also history. Right, so this is the pièce de résistance. North Wall of Rathling, like I mentioned, world-class diving. If you don't think it's world-class, you're rubbish. Because it is, honestly. We're all rubbish if we don't think it's world-class. It is amazing. I've never seen anything like it anywhere. Really haven't. And I'd say that hand on heart. And that's why people go over there. That's why we've been going there 20 odd years and coming back for more. And you'll never get bored of it. Really, honestly, you can't. It's just so much to see. But the conditions can be quite challenging and rewards are very good. Like I mentioned before, wide angle, close up macro, you've got it. Unfortunately, with the currents, you might not get everything that you want, but there's so much to see. You'll get in there. You need to start kissing the reef. You really do. Your buddy, if he's 2 meters away along the reef, your buddy might be experiencing down current and you've got an up current. There are up waterfalls. I don't know what you call an up waterfall. Anybody got any idea? A water up? I don't know. Negative waterfall? Don't know. But there's up currents and down currents creating these, yeah, and you do just keep swimming. And then you get these compressed areas where you'll be swimming with the current and it'll stop and turn on your dive, and then you swim back to the point where you came in, and then you've got a current against you, and it compresses you up, and then you have to start coming up. But the good thing is it comes up into tiered layers after that, and get in amongst the kelp, under the kelp, because it's really tall kelp, and then you can find loads of stuff in the kelp, and there's lots of little rock gullies and stuff like that. So your diving isn't suddenly terminated because you've just come up over the wall at 21 meters. Thing is about this, it's big Atlantic, and it hits this wall. This wall, you'll see it in a moment, it drops significantly down to 200 meters, whack, vertical. So you can imagine Durgan Point here, it's just like that underwater. El Wacko straight down to 200 meters. It's wild. It really is wild. And yeah, you've got these huge rock stacks, but you've also got this limestone arch called Rookallan Arch, which is an intrusion. There is another one at 35 to 37 meters, which I've been down to, not as impressive. And below that, you've got sea caves at 40 meters plus, where you can get taupe, regular sightings of taupe around here, as well as basking sharks. I think Colin, this particular basking shark, I don't know whether Colin's on the call, but as soon as that basking shark was seen, you didn't see Colin. He was in the water with his camera. Talking of which, if you do drop it, that's it. You're never going to find it, ever. It's down at 200 meters somewhere. The walls that are smattered with marine life, they took an ROV down there. They found a wreck, and I can't remember the name of the wreck down there, but they also found that the walls were covered all the way down to the bottom seabed. But like I mentioned before, you get this beautiful kelp, and amongst this kelp, all the way in the kelp here, all the way, there's so much marine life it's supporting. So don't discount the kelp. Lots of nudibranchs. So two sort of wide angle type views. This is, I think this is the pinnacle. It's just vertical coming down, as you can see, and it's just clustered in hydroids, soft corals, encrusting anemones, big boring sponges, plumose anemones, everything. And Rookallan Arch, you can fit about 10 divers across it. This doesn't do it justice. But it is really, really good. And it's got a lot of rare marine life on that. Did I mention that, Mike? We'll see that in a moment when we get the colour shots. This is a really good one to do. You might not find Rookallan Arch sometimes because the current won't allow you to find it. So it's a case of you either get it or you don't. Best time to dive across here doing this type of stuff is neaps. So this is part of Rookallan Arch. The top one is the inside parts of Rookallan Arch. You can see it's just really, really is jammed in. It's what to pick: bubble squirts, striped anemones, elephant sponges. A bit further along the wall, you've got similar sort of topography and fauna, and a lot of flora, that similar sort of stuff that comes along here. The one thing of the flora you do get is, and I've only seen this in a few places, Isle of Man being one of them, this is pink sea fans, Alkyonum hibernicum, which you don't see a lot of, and this is on a very, very, very small patch on the underside. I can tell you where it is exactly, here, where I've got the arrow. If you can see the mouse, it's where it is, on the Rookallan Arch. That's why they don't like you to touch anything, because it's very rare. Probably under recorded as well. Along the wall, I've taken pictures from various dive sites along here. The main ones we do are the Pinnacle, Durgandon Point and Farganlat Point. They all have something else to offer. And these vertical walls, like you can see from here, jewel anemones, lots of marine life. So you can go macro on here if it allows you, but it's also good for wide angle. This is Pinnacle. The Pinnacle is probably the most dangerous dive you're going to do here in terms of currents. It's an excellent dive once you're in, but a lot of this overhangs. It's a Pinnacle that does overhang a little bit, so you have to be extremely wary of where you are and where you're diving. If you're diving in as a threesome, you've got to be very careful. You're better off diving as a buddy pair, and you really do have to be kissing the rocks as you go past. But as you can see from here, I mean, yes, you're seeing quite a lot of the same stuff, but it's the colours, the combinations, it's the angles, it's the rock, it's all sorts of stuff going on. Some of this, I would say this left-hand one was about 29, 30 meters. You wouldn't even think it's that depth. And that's the big problem that you've got to be careful of, that you've got to make sure that you watch your buoyancy and you're on your metal. Most people that are diving this will be diving with backup air, stuff like that. You really don't want to be diving this without it. I dive it with 2 SMBs and reels, redundant air source. It's best to, especially if you're doing photography, because you're looking at this stuff and you think, oh my goodness, and then you need to be getting up over the wall. Right, the last piece of Rathlin Island is the SS Lochgarry. As I mentioned before, it was one of the most dived wrecks around there, and it was a Mac Brain steamship that had literally just been built, and it was converted straight into a troop ship. So what you're going to find is it's almost pristine in terms of some of the stuff on it, if you know what I mean. So it's in relatively intact conditions. I would say this is so photogenic, not only from a wide angle perspective, but you get a lot of marine life and rare marine life around it as well. So it's well worth getting in with your macro and your close up. Very, very friendly wrasse, very, very friendly cuckoo wrasse, as well as ballan wrasse. The crawfish are making a comeback, and you'll see in a bit, but the cup corals, which I've mentioned here, is probably some of the best cup corals I've ever seen anywhere around the UK. Yeah, you can see lots of cup corals around the UK, but these are some of the best cup corals you'll find. Very, very rich colours, jump out at you, and quite large. So the wreck is round about 24 to 32, 85 metres long, 10 metres across. So you've got a lot to play at. It's wreck-like, very, very wreck-like. It's quite upright in its way. There is a bit that has got some chains over it. We'll go to that bit in a moment. But it's like a sort of a mini thistlegorm, if you like. I didn't really want to say that, but I will do. So you've got the bottom of the bow, which is where it hit some rocks across Scotland Way, and then it drifted, and then it sank. So the bow is heading seawards, and the stern is heading landwards, which is a little bit more shallower, but not by very much. Lots of machinery on there. Yeah, lots of cargo winches and main anchor winches, so on and so forth. So, and also you've got this beautiful forecastle area with chain lockers and stuff which you can go into. I wouldn't go in, if you know what I mean. If you go down into this hold one, have a look round here a little bit, and then come out, because a lot of it's silted. Beyond that, you can get to the back of the boilers. You can just about see the chains that the Royal Navy sent down. These link chains are monster. They're about 2 meters per link long. This is the bow forecastle area. Remains the railings, mast here. When we were there in September, the shoals of fish seem to have, I don't know, mushroomed out, mostly pollock and a bit of porcard, but mostly pollock, by the thousand around it at the moment. And one thing I did find on the next dive we did the following day, once I've lost my camera, a tuna swam past. It's the first ever tuna I've seen in the UK. And it was Atlantic bluefin tuna. It was a good 3 meters long, quite fat. It was so big. I've never seen anything like it. It was 6 meters off, and with 15-20 meters fish, you couldn't miss it. And it's like, oh my. And my buddy Tony saw it, but he didn't have time to photograph it. But when we came up, I said to the skipper, and he said, yeah, there's a couple of boats authorised to tuna fish around the corner. So they do tuna fishing around this area. So if I can see one, other people can see one. So you never know what's around here. You never know. So as you can see from here, this is an open engine area, which is crank casings and stuff, and cranks. You've got these huge amounts of trains put down by the Royal Navy to stop people taking live ammunition and guns. So what else can you see? Lots of wrasse, Fenry wrasse, water tank. This is the top of the bow, and I believe these are wash basins. You can find a bath, which is midships. We believe it to be the captain's bath. You've got about 3 tile floors from bathroom areas or toilets. You can find, nobody takes them, they just photograph them. Very nice. This is in the forecastle area. There's a lot of nets, as you can see from this shot, so you have to be a little bit wary about it, but these nets are over this side, so you can go in, have a look around and come back out. Forecastle port railings, this is all, if the detail you can't see, but this is all marine life that's covered on here. Lots of cup corals and plumos and anemones and stuff. This is the stern, which is dropped down. This is actually a gun mount. I think this is part of the rudder or bits and pieces, and somewhere in here you've got a winch. So there's identifiable pieces. Just here is a bollard, which you can see looks like a thimble. Coming round to this Ken, coming round to the bow. Ken's at about 30 meters, just above the seabed. This is at 24. This is at about 32 meters, where the stoved bow in. This is your still bow, which is still not deployed on the starboard side. So that's the anchor. Makes for good photographic work. So one particular occasion we did, this is after a storm, we went down, and if you remember, I mentioned water tower, which is here, the water tank. This is the shot, and we're about 24 meters. Goodness knows what type of jellyfish that is, but it was a once in a lifetime jellyfish, and we had 20 meter viz. So moving swiftly on in our last 6 minutes. This is just a round robin of some of the close-ups I've done. So hopefully you'll appreciate these if you're working with a lot of macrolife. I couldn't resist putting these in. I really can't. I mean, it's just so like, whoa. And the one on the right-hand side and the bottom left are both from the Loch Garry. I mean, look at the colours on that. You just can't beat it. Really, really can't beat it. It's just out of this world. This is Rathlin Island is one of the only places you're going to get both white and yellows encrusting anemones. Usually the white encrusting is more north and southwest Britain. I would say not the best place to get jewel anemones, but you do get a lot of them around here. It's mainly for the encrusting anemones, Devonshire cup corals, but also elegant anemones with their new name, Silista elegans, and burrowing, of course, and striped. Mike, quick question, and this is to everybody as well. Are you using iNaturalist now? Okay, well, it's a new database that's come out. It's front-ended by an application called Seek. But for all your marine life, you can upload it. Bernard's uploading a pile of stuff at the moment, as is quite a few others. It's got something like 74 million observations, and it's not just marine creatures and marine. It's all topside stuff as well. It's Animalia as a whole, including bird species, which I know you take a lot of. It's a huge global database undertaking, and it's sponsored by Californian Ocean Sciences and the National Geographic. So what I will do is, if people can't remember, I'll send a link to pass on via Alex. I've started backloading 40,000 underwater images of marine creatures up there now. It's superseding NBM Gateway and a lot of the other old databases now. It really is. And it's ideal because a lot of these other old databases were mainly for professionals. But what you're getting now are, very well-informed, well-learned amateurs like myself and a lot of others that do a lot of amateur marine biology, sea searchers, professionals, everybody. And they've got something like 28 million people on there at the moment, or some big number anyway of users on it. I think it's probably about 7 million, but it's a lot. So people are tipping in loads and loads of stuff, which is good because also you can put your GPS in there. It's got everything you need, and it's very, very user friendly, and you can get over to the observations. You can zoom in dead quick. It's very, very quick. A lot of these older systems are very, very slow and clunky. So what I'm trying to say is, yeah, anybody who's doing this with sea search and stuff like that, get it on there. And I tell you, it's a massive resource, and it really is going to be a very, very useful tool. But I digress, and I've only got 1 minute left. So very quickly, sponges. There are something around about 260 plus sponges. I'm sure that Claire Lightfoot will mention it and say how many exactly are there around Rathlin Island and around this area. That is nearly about 90% of the sponges around the UK, some of which are very, very rare. So it's well worth going around there just for sponge spotting. Other marine creatures that you get around here, like I mentioned, are hydroids, sea squirts, worms, but also fan worms, sea pens like this one, which is quite rare. It's in a micro habitat just off the side of the Loch Garry. Thankfully, it's been saved by the bottom trawling that was slightly further off it to the east. So we're very lucky. Bigger stuff, ling and congas, as we mentioned earlier, which you do get quite a lot of ling around there. So it's well worth looking out for those. Crawfish or crayfish, some people are making a big comeback now. Lots of scorpion fish, the usual suspects, so to speak, around there. There's also, like I mentioned, midwater fish and so on and so forth, as well as the cod. Yes, very quickly, I was involved in a diver rescue. Well, I say involved, I was on the boat that was involved on the diver rescue. Let's get it right. So I was just sat there as a passenger. But you can look this up, and it was where we went off to rescue 2 ribs that had got entangled, and they were going hell for leather with the currents. The currents were taking them hell for leather to the west side of Rathlin in very, very big waves. Luckily, Tommy Cecil's son, I think it is, was running the Rathlin Express, got there first ahead of the 2 lifeboats that went screaming off, but we went screaming off as well. It was a bit of a touch and go situation. You can see from here, this doesn't do it justice. This was big, big stuff. Where that lifeboat is you can't see it, but they were heading out here, which was a no man's land of waves and big swells. You don't really want to be out there. Luckily, they were saved. There was about 9 people across the 2 boats stuck on them. And very quickly, to round up, the other areas are Shamrock Pinnacle, which is not dived a lot because it's in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Church Plateau is a new site that we're doing. The Pinnacle that I've mentioned before and Fargan that I've mentioned before. So there are some really, really good out-of-the-way dive sites. Shamrock is an amazing place, weird place, and it starts at 28. So yeah, definitely a weird place. Mentioned a bit about the other 2 wrecks, Wreck of the Tovey. That's been featured in the recent, maybe the One show or something, and the Storks, which is another little rock that comes up with the skerries. The Argadalus, the bow is a bit tricky, but is not frequented these days. And of course, if you've got the gas and the gear, they do, and this I'm only covering recreational diving, not technical diving, but there is Operation Deadlight submarine graveyard that people do go to there, but also the big wrecks off Rathlin, which are things like HMS Audacious, but that's goes into the realms of technical diving, but really good photography. And I dive with Norman Woods, who did a lot of that, and with Richie Stevenson, and I tell you, it's something else, completely something else. References and acknowledgements. Thank you very much to these people, and of course, with permission to use these. Obviously, if you look up, you can actually use these in private pictures in private viewings like this. But there is some nice YouTubey stuff around as well. Further reading, I always plug these because I think it's especially the Sea Search and Paul Naylor's excellent books. They are very, very good, well worth it, especially around here. And if you're into a bit more of the archaeology and cultural history of Rathlin Island, and yeah, want to see some dodgy pictures by Mr. Gilbert, they're in this big book, which is a very big coffee table book. So this is me, and this is the end of the presentation. 4 minutes late, sorry about that, Alex. But as you can see, the world of diving is just a compass bearing away, and it is that. It is just go and do your diving. If anybody is querying what that is a Nordic compass, and I saw it on somebody has got a tattoo of that. I saw, and yeah, nice little compass that. Thank you for attending, and thank you for allowing me to present this talk.